Rewilding is a form of nature restoration which is becoming more and more popular across the globe. Rewilding is allowing a landscape to recover to a natural, uncultivated state and giving nature the space to shape the area, rather than humans shaping and maintaining for a specific landscape. It has proven to be amazing for biodiversity and has many other environmental benefits like carbon sequestration, flood management and clean air and water. Ireland has been slow to implement rewilding compared to the rest of Europe, but there has been some uptake in recent years. Randall Plunkett, a filmmaker and owner of Dunsany Estate in County Meath, has rewilded 750 acres of his land and has seen amazing results. In 2014, Plunkett was making a movie in which people had disappeared. He needed to film in an area that looked like it had been abandoned, so he decided to use his own property. As Plunkett watched the vegetation grow on his formerly farmed land, he started seeing plants he'd never seen before. Then came new insects and other invertebrates, and eventually new birds and mammals. Plunkett became obsessed with what he was seeing unfold on his land. The movie has since been abandoned, but Plunkett decided to let nature take hold of his land and watch the beauty unfold around him. He has seen an amazing increase in biodiversity and the appearance of many animals he'd never before seen on his land. Dunsany is now home to the vast majority of native Irish animal species, notably greater spotted woodpeckers, peregrine falcons and red kites, otters, badgers and a herd of over 80 red deer. Another well-known Irish rewilder is author and sculptor Owen Dalton. Back in 2009, Dalton decided to sell his house in Dublin and move to the countryside. He bought an abandoned patch of old farmland and a ruined house in West Cork with a view to restoring it. The house came with 25 acres of land, as well as a share in some mountain commonage. Dalton instantly fell in love, but could see that his new home place was being destroyed by invasive species, mainly rhododendron, feral goats and sika deer. The goats and deer were grazing the vegetation to non-existence, leaving only the poisonous, invasive rhododendron, which has no benefit to Irish ecosystems. There were still some mature native trees that were too big for the herbivores to kill, but no new growth or understory. Dalton made it his mission to restore the land. He applied for a native woodland grant and was successful, but he had to remove all non-native species. The grant allowed Dalton to erect a fence to keep out the deer, goats and neighbouring sheep. He then declared war on the rhododendron and cleared it from his 25 acres and even from his neighbour's land. Once the invasive species were gone, Dalton simply let nature do the rest. He watched the native trees sprout up all over his land from the stock of mature trees that remained. As time went on and the woodland recovered, he saw more and more plant and animal species return to his land, and he learned he wasn't just restoring a forest. This was an Irish Atlantic rainforest, a temperate rainforest, one of the rarest biomes in the world. The rainforest is now home to roughly 15 native Irish tree species and countless animals like pine martens, birds of prey, frogs and foxes, to name just a few. If you'd like to hear more about Dalton's journey to restore his land, check out his book, An Irish Atlantic Rainforest. If we're ever to see a fully functioning ecosystem in Ireland, we'll have to think bigger. We can't just rely on private landowners. Ireland was once one of the most forested countries in Europe, with over 80% tree cover. Now we're the second least forested country in the continent, with just 11%. 9% is forestry plantations for timber production, with closely planted non-native trees providing little benefit to nature. Just 2% is natural woodland, and much of that is overrun with invasive species like rhododendron and laurel. Of every country in the world, Ireland's the 13th most nature depleted. The countries that are worse off than us are mostly small countries with very dense populations. Our national parks, which are publicly owned, are being grazed by privately owned sheep. They're covered in invasive plant species and overpopulated with deer and feral goats. We need to act if we're to stop the decline of biodiversity in our country. So let's look at 3 animals we could reintroduce to rewild Ireland. First up, the Eurasian lynx. The bones of a lynx were discovered in Kilgreeny Cave in County Waterford. The bones dated back to roughly 8,000 years ago and were from only one juvenile animal. But where there's a juvenile, there's a breeding population. Lynx bones don't turn up in cave sites as often as other animals like bears and wolves because they don't live in caves and aren't eaten by animals that live in caves, so it makes sense that we've discovered much more bear and wolf bones in Ireland. Lynx are a medium-sized cat, the biggest of them weighing up to 36 kg, about the size of a Labrador. They prey mostly on small deer and rabbits, but also birds, rodents and foxes. Ireland has a huge issue with our native vegetation being overgrazed by deer. Lynx would massively help this problem, not just by killing the single deer they eat every fortnight, but through the ecology of fear. When deer are aware of the presence of a predator, they change their behaviour. They don't stay in the same areas for too long and keep on the move, also avoiding areas where they'd be vulnerable, in turn allowing vegetation to recover. This phenomenon is most famously showcased by the wolf reintroduction into Yellowstone National Park in 1995. If you've never heard of that, check out the video on screen. Lynx specifically target smaller deer, which would be brilliant for Irish ecosystems. Of the 3 prominent deer species in Ireland, red deer are native and sika and fallow deer are non-native. Fallow deer actually have a lot of benefits to European ecosystems as long as their population is kept in check, but sika deer have shown to be quite damaging. Muntjac deer now have a growing population in Ireland, and muntjac are a highly invasive species. If lynx were introduced, it almost seems as though the system is set up for them to fix it, as muntjac deer and sika deer are the 2 smallest of the 4 species in Ireland, and thus would be targeted by the lynx. Lynx rarely target livestock as they prefer to stay within tree cover and away from human habitation. A lynx has never killed a human, and it really seems that if we could prepare the Irish landscape for them, that they'd be a wonderful and beneficial addition to our ecosystems. Next up is the wild boar. Wild boar are known as the gardeners of the forest. They use a shovel-like bone on their nose to plough up the soil and eat roots, tubers, nuts and invertebrates. This exposes the soil and aerates it, giving wildflower and tree seeds a chance to germinate. They hugely boost biodiversity and are the only European animal capable of eating high quantities of bracken. Bracken is a native fern, but without wild boar to eat it, bracken can take over an area and quickly become a monoculture, preventing the growth of other plants. Wild boar are one of the only animals in the world that can suppress the regrowth of rhododendron, the most problematic invasive species in Ireland. They can't eat the trees themselves, but when an area has been cleared of rhododendron, wild boar eat the roots and inhibit the regrowth, so it would be an inexpensive tool in tackling this invasive species. It's said that the wild boar went extinct in Ireland in the 12th century due to overhunting, the last of them being killed in Canturk, County Cork. Canturk in Irish is Ceann Turk, meaning boar's head. Wild boar were reintroduced to the UK in the 80s, and there are now more than 2,000 of them, and they draw in wildlife tourism and boost biodiversity. The UK, like Ireland, hunted all their large predators, the wolf, bear and lynx, to extinction, so UK wild boar populations have to be managed. Some see this as problematic, but the culled boar don't go to waste. They are sold as meat, providing a natural and healthy food source. Wild boar would work wonders for the natural areas in Ireland, and hopefully we'll see their return in years to come. Probably the most controversial animal in rewilding is the wolf. It constantly draws arguments, rife with fears created by childhood fairy tales and disinformation. If you live in an area with wolves, the odds of you being hit by lightning are greater than your odds of being attacked by wolves. Wolves do everything they can to avoid humans. People spend days on wildlife holidays searching for wolves, and often go without a sight of them, but leave mystified having heard their nightly howls. In Ireland, the wolf was once revered. Ireland farmed with goats, sheep and cattle for over 5,000 years, while wolves were abundant. It wasn't until the 17th century that Oliver Cromwell, one of the most evil men in Irish history, ordered his men to wipe out our wolves. It was said that the Irish were savages and that our country needed to be civilised. Cromwell and his men slaughtered an Irish animal that was important in our culture and folklore. To the Irish, the wolf was the son of the land, Mach Tíre. Wolves would have an effect on the ecosystems of Ireland that no other animal could hope to match. They would regulate deer populations and completely change the behaviour of deer. Wolves target the sick, injured and weak animals, so even prevent the spread of diseases and damaging genetics. Wolves also keep red fox numbers in check. Foxes are a beautiful animal and an important part of the ecosystem, but in the absence of top predators like wolves and lynx, foxes and other mesopredators become overpopulated and overconfident, constantly preying on certain vulnerable animals like curlews, lapwings and other threatened Irish species. Strangely, the presence of apex predators like wolves protects animals further down the food chain. Wolves regulate large herbivore and medium-sized predator populations and keep the whole ecosystem functioning, the very definition of a keystone species. To introduce the animals as suggested in this video, or any of the 100 plus species that were lost to Ireland since humans arrived, we would need to do a lot of preparation work. Prepare our ecosystems, put financial compensation schemes in place for farmers who lose livestock or crops, educate people on how to behave in an environment with large animals, but it can be done. Wild boar, wolves and lynx are now present in almost every country in mainland Europe, even countries like the Netherlands, which has a human population density 6 times greater than Ireland's. Let's save the Irish ecosystems, restore our Atlantic rainforests, our mountains and great wetlands. Let's rewild our country. If you enjoyed this video, please like it and subscribe to the channel to help it grow. If you have any ideas for future videos, let me know in the comments below. Thanks for watching.